Hey y'all, it's Mary, and I'm so excited you're here for this month's topic, which is all about community. But before we jump into today's episode, we need to start with a little truth bomb. Y'all, we are all lonely and desiring belonging. This month, we'll explore ways to cultivate an authentic community, look at when it's time to let go of toxic friendships, how to actually make friends, and I'll even help you learn how to become a great friend. All right, guys, I'll see you inside this week's episode.
Welcome to the Living Fully Alive podcast with Mary Hyatt, here to help you find your authentic voice, learn how to love yourself, and embrace your life. And now, your host, life and mindset coach, body love advocate, and doTERRA Presidential Diamond, Mary Hyatt.
Hey y'all, I am so excited to be with you today because today is the first episode in this month's topic of community. Last month, we explored the ins and outs of identity. And so if you haven't checked out those episodes, make sure to do so because they are pretty amazing. We've been getting some awesome feedback, and there's 5 episodes all about the essential question of who are you? So go back, take a listen to those. But this month is devoted solely to community. And I was talking to my part-time co-host, Lindsley Brooks, about this month, and we were debating kind of what we wanted to talk about. And I kept coming back to this central idea of belonging, that we are all hungry for community, for connection, for relationships. And it seems to be more and more difficult to have great relationships, friendships. Forget like romantic partners, intimate partners. I'm talking about your tribe, your people, your gang, all the people that you are living life with, or in a lot of cases, the lack of that. And this month, we're going to get into the ins and outs of friendships and community, how to build it. How do you move on from relationships that aren't healthy anymore? How can you have difficult conversations with people and challenge them? But I felt like we needed to sort of start from the beginning and talk about what the heck happened to community. Because if we think about it, what's interesting is that we don't technically, quote fingers, technically need community anymore. I mean, before we needed community for survival, and we don't really need that anymore. But I want to rewind the clock because we have to sort of explore what was community, because there's such a lack of it now, and yet we're hungering for it. And yet I feel like there's sort of this awkwardness and confusion on how do we get community? How do we build it? How do we keep it? How do we cultivate it? How do we nurture it? And it's a little tricky. So if we rewind and think about, all right, community was there because there was an actual need for it, for the very survival of the human race. I mean, there was this idea of running in a pack, that tribal sort of existence, honestly. And when we were in that kind of tribe, it was protection. We were able to defend ourselves easier when there was a group that was bound together, and they acted as a unit. I remember, this is like, I see this in nature all the time. I remember this, God, how many years ago is this now? Probably like 15 years ago. I interned in Alaska for a family who were commercial salmon fishers, and they had 6 kids. I was the nanny and the cook. It was a pretty terrible summer. We were literally on an island by ourselves with these kids, and it didn't get dark until about, 2 a.m. And the people would fish all day long, and we didn't have a bathroom. We had sort of an outhouse. It was like a mile away from my room that was at the dock house on the water. it was a really trying time for me. But I remember this experience. They were talking about, because we're literally in the middle of the ocean, right? They were talking about an experience that they had about killer whales. And if you don't know this about me, I am mesmerized by whales. Like, it's one of those things, I guess maybe growing up in Nashville, Tennessee, I never really had that experience of being by the ocean or having those experiences where you naturally see whales or dolphins. I mean, I just didn't grow up with that. And so there's something about ocean life that is just fascinating to me. And so I've always been just sort of enraptured, if that is even a word, by whales. Like, I love thinking about them. I love sharks as well. And anyways, they were telling me the story about a pod of killer whales that came by the island, and they were out fishing on this little metal boat called a skiff. And they were telling me that this entire pod of whales started to swim by them. And if you can imagine being in a boat with like 3 or 4 people, a tiny little boat, and just these massive creatures swimming by you, it's terrifying, you know? And so, but they see them swimming. And what was so fascinating, I remember this part of the story, they said that the mothers, the females, the grown females were on the outside of this circle. And the males and the babies were on the inside. And it was like this visual, this mental picture of what community looks like. There is this sort of outer ring of protection that was protecting the more vulnerable, the babies of any potential outside threat. And to me, that's sort of the gift of a tribe, of a pod. There is a increased protection that happens. And if you think about in history, not only was it about protection, you know, those that band together, you make a stronger unit together, but in the sense of survival, everybody had a job. You know, everyone was responsible for something vital within that tribe. It was like its own little microcosm. Someone was in charge of the hunting, or there were a group of people that maybe made the spears, somebody that was cooking the food, somebody harvested the pelts and made clothing, someone fed the children, someone managed the gardens or the gathering of the berries or the other items of food. I mean, you kind of get the idea. Everybody had their role. And that role made sure that the entire community was taken care of. And what's so beautiful about these tribal communities is it wasn't just for survival and for protection. It was also a rich culture. They had the ability to take people through rites of passage. There were, the old wise women who were passing down knowledge, medicine women who were caretaking the entire tribe. You had these ways of celebrating where there would often be tribal dance. There would be ways to mark important things that happened within that community. And it really was this sense that we're doing this life together. There was this sense of the whole versus the singular. And if we fast forward to today, it's just vastly different, isn't it? I mean, it's crazy to kind of think about where we have ended up. And it's definitely not anymore. Community is not for survival. It's not even necessarily for protection. Now, I will say this as a caveat. I am obviously talking about Western society. So if we're being honest, I mean, I'm really coming from the place of a white, middle-class, Anglo-Saxon demographic, okay? So this is not necessarily, worldwide. Am I speaking for all cultures or even for all people in America? And I mean, if you really look at it, there are still tribal structures that exist today in other cultures in America within immigrant populations. I mean, God, that's one of my favorite things about other cultures and community structures is their sense of family, is their sense of community that, to be honest, I think that white people have really lost. You see this existing still with Native peoples on reservations, and then, of course, in gang culture. And so the conversation we're having today, and I just want to acknowledge this because I think it's important, is really a conversation for sort of middle class Western society. And this is where I see the loss of community, the breakdown of community. And for most people, though, even though we don't need community to protect us necessarily, we don't need community to give us our sense of purpose necessarily, I really believe, if we're all being honest, that we do want to be a part of a community because there is something that is indescribably lovely about being a part of a group of people who share something in common, who live life together, to have a sense of home, have a sense of belonging. I think that we are sort of created to exist in community. There's something that is so special and so magical about community. And if nothing else, I mean, it really helps us as individuals feel less lonely. I mean, a community is a safe space for us. And yet most people, and again, with this certain demographic, do not have that safe space anymore. There really is a crisis of belonging. And I love how Brené Brown describes this. She says, a deep sense of love and belonging is an irreducible need of all people. We are biologically, cognitively, physically, and spiritually wired to love, to be loved, and to belong. When those needs are not met, we don't function as we are meant to. We break, we fall apart, we numb, we ache, we hurt others, we get sick. And so when we have this breakdown of community, to me, it really starts to cultivate this spirit, as Tara Brach, who is a phenomenal author and podcast host and Buddhist speaker, and she talks about how there is this view of the other. That all of a sudden our sameness, our likeness, the things that bring us together, the things that tie us together no longer exist. And we start seeing other people as a threat. We start seeing our differences. We start seeing the things that are not similar. And it's sort of this threat of the other. This other that we can't really describe because it's just not us. And when we don't live in community, especially diverse communities, we have this sort of like arm's length distance between us and other people. And it cuts us off from being able to have empathy towards others, being able to understand what people are going through, having compassion towards others. And this is where we see the racism creep up. This is where we see a lot of issues start to creep up. And I'm not going to get into all of that in this conversation, but this is a result from the breakdown of community. When we feel like we are better alone than with other people, that we are isolated from other people, that we don't live life with other people, it gets to be a scary place. And I started to, in my own little way, investigate, all right, what has contributed to this? Like, how did this happen? Because I can remember even for myself, like, God, I mean, even 10, 15 years ago, I felt like I had more of a sense of community than I do now. It was easier. It was natural. People knew how to communicate, how to reach out. And so I was like, all right, what is the culprit? Why has this happened? How did this happen? And the main culprit for me and what I've experienced is this parallel sort of breakdown of community with the parallel rise of our online world. And this really hit home for me last night when I ordered some ice cream from my favorite ice cream store on Postmates, which is an app on your phone, and to have it delivered right to my doorstep. And this lovely woman went out. She picked it up for me, delivered it to my house within about 30 minutes at about 9 p.m. last night, all while I was at home watching Netflix in my pajamas. And if I didn't want to, I could have texted the app and asked that she leave it on my doorstep, and I would have never had to even see her. But I didn't do that. I walked out, and as I was greeting this woman who was supplying me with my lovely little ice cream craving, I mean, it was just like, dang, this is what life in a scary way could become, where you don't go out to eat, you stay in your home, you have food delivered to you, which I'm guilty of. Oh my God, so much. Being here by myself, it's like, oh yeah, let me just, grab something from this app. They'll have it delivered. I can stay home and do whatever I need to do. And I'm not an anthropologist. I'm just, sort of observing what I see as a human, as a practical psychologist. But it's pretty crazy to think that we can isolate so much now that we really don't ever have to see anyone else. We have our computers, we have texting, we have apps that do just about anything and everything for us. And our experience of people now has become fake. I mean, everything seems to be some kind of a bot, and soon it's going to be a lot of artificial intelligence. I mean, you think about Alexa and Siri and a lot of reviews on products, for example. You can't even really trust those anymore because those all come from bot accounts. You think about people who pay for followers on Instagram or whatever, all these fake accounts. And there is so much data and research that is showing how this new online, quote unquote, social world is causing an increase in depression and loneliness. And it's funny that it's kind of laughable as it relates to social, social, quote unquote, social media, but it's not actually social. I mean, if you think about what it has done to communities, seemingly it's bringing people together, and yet we feel more isolated than we ever have felt. In an age when we are supposed to be more connected, we're actually more disconnected than ever. And so for me, what I'm noticing is the more and more we become addicted to our phones and to social media, there's this just massive breakdown in community because we don't really need each other anymore for survival. We can get fake community online, and we could be in our homes without really seeing another human being for a really long time, or even having significant or impactful kinds of communication with other humans. Maybe we have to see somebody if we're driving somewhere, but especially if you work at home, this just makes this even more true. Just that aloneness, that loneliness. And if Brene Brown is right, which I believe that she is, that we are all wired for love, to be loved, and for belonging, there is this ache in our hearts that is really, I think, starting to scream a little bit louder, like, hey, like this kind of isolation is not healthy. This is not giving me what I need. And on top of it, what makes it challenging, and don't worry, I'll get to all the good, hopeful things soon, but we kind of have to identify the problem first. But on top of that, even when we're physically with people, most people are staring down at their phones. We have lost the ability to be present with one another, to actually connect, to be in real time with real people. And so when we are not present, when we're with a body, but not online, like in real life, not tuned in to somebody else, what this creates is we lose touch with the real world, and we stay in sort of that fantasy thinking. We get consumed with the highlight reel, and we start to think that life is what we're seeing on social media. We are comparing ourselves and comparing our lives and our relationships and our bodies and everything in between, our businesses, to the highlight reel that we're seeing on social media. And so it creates this weird alternate universe where everything looks happy, and yet that makes us feel even more isolated because we feel like we're the only ones who aren't successful, beautiful, and have these picture-perfect families and relationships. And of course, what does that cause? More depression. The comparison, as Theodore Roosevelt says, comparison is the thief of joy. It robs us of our joy because we're stuck in and consumed with the addiction of this highlight reel. And so also what happens when we're not present is we lose our empathy. We don't catch micro expressions from the person sitting across the table from us or in the car with us. We aren't listening fully. We sort of have this barrier between us and other people. And so we can't actually be there for people. And people aren't actually there for us because we're not really fully there. We can't really fully connect on all the different sensory levels because we're mildly, if not completely, checked out. And then on a personal level, when we're not present, we're not paying attention to our actual needs. Like if I'm sitting with myself and I've got this current of emotions below the surface, or I'm feeling tired or lonely or hungry, then I'm not able to access and pay attention to that if I'm not present. And numbing with media exacerbates this. So I'm not taking care of myself. I'm not identifying what my needs are. And what I would say is probably the saddest thing is that we miss out on the magic of the moment. I mean, if I really think about it, if you really think about it, the things that we remember most in our lives, those moments that we want to get back to, those moments that are our like special highlights, sort of, oh my God, this was incredible. Those all came when we were in a state of being fully present, when we weren't distracted with something else, but when we were being fully present in the moment. And for me, it's usually been when I've been fully present with other people. That's when the magic happens. And if we're not present, we're going to sacrifice our peace, because peace comes from being in the present moment, not living in the past, not living in the future. And so this is what I'm starting to see, that there is this lack of presence that is disconnecting from our ability to create powerful communities. And as an added little challenge, if that was not enough, then as adults, our natural community is a little bit harder to find, isn't it? I mean, I find that once we are out of school, we have to put in more effort, because where we were used to being given sort of a natural community within our peer group of school, if we are working in an office, a lot of businesses have gone online, a lot more people are working from home. If you have moved away from a traditional church setting where you're going and seeing these people, or you're in a small group, think about our neighborhoods. There's not a lot of neighborhood community anymore. I mean, most people don't even know their neighbors, and they don't come out of their houses that often. They don't even open their blinds. And so this is what has contributed to the breakdown of community. And it's leaving us isolated and lonely. And I think there's literally no worse feeling than feeling lonely. Oh, God. I mean, it's just like there's so much that happens in our loneliness, despair and depression and anxiety. It's just not natural, y'all. It's not a good thing. I mean, there's obviously, of course, times where we are lonely and it's okay, and we can learn to tolerate that and sit in the discomfort of the loneliness. But we need community. We need friends. We need to be able to live life with people. We need to connect. We need to love. I mean, our state of affairs is really calling out, I believe, for more love, for finding what connects us rather than what pulls us apart. And everything in our media wants to preach the opposite. It is, all the algorithms are designed where tragedy and horrible things that are happening in the world get a lot more attention than the good stuff. And we have to really shut all of that off. Open our doors, open our windows, open our mouths, step outside, smile, connect. We have to sort of remember some of these skills that our parents had. They knew how to connect. They knew their neighbors. They could go over and borrow a cup of sugar. They would sit on each other's porches in the summer and hang out. And there was this real sense of belonging. And we've got to get back to that place, I believe, so that all this craziness in the world starts to quiet because it's getting a little intense. So here's what I see as being the benefits of community. I mean, I think we know this intuitively. I think that this is hardwired in us, but I want to give voice to it just so that we can begin to see, oh yeah, like this is a tangible benefit that we're getting when we start engaging within communities, because there is a little bit of that awkwardness when you haven't been fostering relationships, or you have forgotten how to make friends or to reach out. And in later episodes in this month, I'm going to get into the actual how-tos of how to do this. But first, we got to understand that there's a reward that we're going to get when we actually invest in nurturing a community, when we get out of our comfort zone and reach out to people. And here are the benefits. Hey y'all, I just wanted to interrupt this episode real quick to tell you that you are not going to want to miss my episode next week with my co-host and BFF, Lindsley Brooks. We take this month's topic of community even deeper, and we're going to have a pretty candid conversation about when friendships become toxic, how to end them, and we're going to share with you some ways on how you can create healthy, authentic, vulnerable relationships that encourage you to live from your highest self. So make sure that you subscribe to the Living Fully Alive podcast so that you don't miss out on any of these episodes. I know that emails get lost in your spam folder, so subscribing means my episodes come right to your phone. All right, now back to this week's episode. We have a safe place. We have a place that we get to call our own, a place where we can come home to, where we feel seen, where we feel heard, where we feel nourished, where we feel understood. I mean, that is what I think on the deepest level we are desiring, is to have that sense of belonging. I am welcome here. There is space for me at the table, that I'm wanted, that I am desired. I mean, there's no better feeling than that. The second benefit is that it is incredibly supportive. The old saying, it takes a village. It takes a village, y'all. Like, we were not meant to do this alone. I mean, I know that for my own life, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't imagine having the support of my friends as I went through some really hard times in my life, whether it be the trauma and the death of my nephew, which I know some of you guys have heard me speak about before, whether it has been going through my divorce, since relationships, since then, breakups, heartache, moving houses again and again and again, changing businesses, loss of friendships, all of the self-work, the self-development that I've gone through. There has been incredible support. And just the practice of giving and receiving support, that there is a sense that, hey, if you're going through something that's hard and challenging, you've got people who've got your back in a really pure way. And when you have a real beautiful community, there is this non-judgmental support where we're here to lift each other higher. Where there is a need, we band together and we meet that need. And then there is a healthy balance where you need help with something, then you're able to get that support. I mean, I think in a really pure sense, you look at communities like the Amish, for example, and it's like when there's a newlywed couple and they need to, get married and build a house, the whole community comes together and builds the house with them. And it gets done quickly and everybody is there. And the wives bringing, the food and whatever. And I'm not suggesting that we all become Amish or join a cult or something of that nature, or a commune or whatever. I mean, hats to you. I mean, I can really get it why people do that. But there is such an incredible support that happens within community. And you see this echoed in churches that are healthy. You see this echoed in different groups that come together. AA groups, Al-Anon groups, these kinds of groups that really support each other getting through these hard times. And that's the gift of community. The third benefit, this is a fun one, is that it brings celebration. That there is a time where you mark these special occasions with celebration, which to me is so incredible and vital to live a life where you feel fully alive, is to celebrate the wins, the big life changes, a new house, a new baby, a new marriage, a new promotion, whatever it might be. that within a community, you're able to celebrate one another, that you really are excited about people pushing their limits and becoming, sort of these rites of passage, going through these rites of passage and becoming just, the highest versions of this house. It's amazing. So having that sense of celebration. The fourth benefit, I think this is really important and often overlooked, but the fourth benefit of community is that it is challenging. When you're living in community with other people, and you're not isolated, but when you're living with other people, you're going to be challenged. You're going to be triggered. You might be called out on your stuff. In a healthy community, there's space for that, where sort of iron sharpens iron, where there is accountability. Like, hey, man, I see this is happening, and like this isn't your truest self. And we're going to talk about that in a later episode this month. But where there is space for challenge to happen, and there's so much benefit, and it's such a gift to lean into this piece of community. We're going to rub each other the wrong way. It's going to give us the opportunity, as everybody in our lives, our teachers, our mirrors, it's going to give us the opportunity to deal with things that we wouldn't be able to deal with by ourselves. We wouldn't be able to become the people we want to become when we're isolated in our own homes by ourselves. That there's something about being in the community that forces us to look at difficult things, to have difficult conversations that allow us to become better people. And the fifth and final benefit of community is that it inspires growth. When you see people inside of your community that are pushing towards things that are, again, a healthy community. We'll talk about how to create healthy communities. But there's something that happens where we get to grow together. With those challenges, the only option is to shut down or to evolve and grow. There is this ability to look at what other people are doing and going, oh, I like that. I'm going to try that on. Being able to swap notes, share wisdom, give each other advice. That's such a gift of community, is that it's not just your mind, but you sort of have this collective mind with people who are learning different things, who are interested in different things, and get to share that inside of the community, and you grow. Because we simply just can't know everything by ourselves, obviously, and it would just take us forever. And so having this group of people that come together, it's just like, oh my God, knowledge goes up, experiences increase, and there's just special growth. There is truly so much power in coming together, so much power in real friendships, and those real people that we can count on to live our life with. And that is why I am devoting an entire month to this topic, because I want to explore the ways to cultivate community. I want to look at, how do you foster authenticity and vulnerability in our friendships? How do you have candid conversations with people that the relationships have maybe become toxic? How do you have those difficult conversations? And then for those of us who don't have communities, how do you actually make friends? And how do you become a great friend? How do you show up for people in a way that makes you like a hot commodity in the sense of friendships? Because a lot of people talk about, well, I can't make friends easily, or the friends that I have aren't great, or people will be my friend and then they aren't my friend and they leave. And so it's sort of like, what are you bringing to the table as a friend? Versus always expecting, like, I want this person to treat me this way. How are you treating other people? But before we get into all of those how-tos, that's kind of why I wanted to shift into looking, okay, what contributed to this breakdown? What are the benefits that we're getting from community so that we actually want it and we're willing to do the work to get there? And I want to have us do a little brief mindset work and get honest with ourselves, because in order to come back to community, we have to gain some new awareness. And I believe that we can do this in 3 ways. The first way to come back to this community with this new awareness is to acknowledge what's missing. I want you to really think about what it's costing you for not having community. What are you missing out on? What do you not get to experience? How are you not able to have that sense of belonging, or not be able to feel and give support, or not be able to celebrate when things happen in your life, not being challenged, not having other minds come together so that you can grow. Acknowledge what's missing. We have to identify what the issue is before we move to find the solution. So acknowledge what's missing. The second way for this new awareness is to acknowledge how you've been isolating yourselves. What is it that scares you about friendships or about communities? Kind of what's your go-to way of isolating? Is it social media, Netflix? What are some of your excuses that you have in the reasons why you think it's hard to make friends, or how people don't like you, or perhaps why you don't like people? What are your go-to excuses to why you don't have community already? Acknowledge how you've been isolating yourself. And these are real inquiries. I would encourage you to slow down and journal these out. Take some time and really take a deep dive and explore internally. This is the work. What's missing, and how have you been isolating yourself? And then lastly, the third way to come back to a sense of community is we got to get clear on what it is that we want. Acknowledge what we want. If you could have the most amazing community, if you could design it any way that you'd want to, what kind of community would you want? What things would you do? What kind of friends would you have? How would you communicate? What things would you have fun doing together? What would it look like to live life with these people during the hard and the messy and the amazing and the great? What would be the ideal community for you? What kind of people do you want to be looking for? Where do they hang out? What are they interested in? What are they doing on the weekends that you would see yourself doing with them? What do you dream of when you think about your friendships and you think about your community? Acknowledge what you want. So these three ways: acknowledge what's missing, acknowledge how you've been isolating yourself, and acknowledge what you want. And with this new awareness, this is going to give you the opportunity to begin cultivating and creating really rich community with one person, two people, three people, four people, a whole group of people, and really bring us back to that core need to love, to be loved, and to have a sense of belonging. And like I said, in the future, upcoming weeks, we'll explore the how-tos. But I think it's pretty fascinating to slow down and go, wow, yeah, this really is something that, if I'm being honest, I miss and that I desire. And I've been isolating myself. And here's why. I'm scared. I'm scared of rejection. I'm scared of judgment. I'm judging myself. I'm rejecting myself. I don't think I'm cool enough, pretty enough, rich enough, smart enough. And I lack that confidence to go out and make friends. Okay, great. That's new awareness. We can work with that without judgment, just acknowledging, like, yeah, I've been in this place of being scared. I don't know how to talk to people. I don't know what to say. What do we do? Do we go out for drinks? Do I invite them over? It feels awkward. I don't know what to say. Okay, great. We can work with that. Just that acknowledgement. I'm lonely. I want friends. My friends suck. They're toxic. They're unhealthy people. I don't want to be like them anymore. Just this honesty, this radical honesty of sort of acknowledging where we are and where we want to be is going to help us move to those new places where hopefully a year from now, we can look back and you can remember this podcast and you can remember this episode and you go, that's when I got honest with the fact that I wanted richer relationships in my life, richer friendships, richer community. And that's when I got honest that I needed to do something different in order to step into a life that was more fulfilling for myself. Because I know that it can happen. And I'm excited to carry on this conversation this month because we've got a lot to get into. And I'm just so honored that you have taken this first step and listened to this first episode. And I encourage you to share it with your people. Because what could be so powerful is creating an intentional community together with other people. And I know this for a fact that you're not the only one that feels this way, that this is an epidemic that is happening quicker and quicker every day. And my clients are always telling me, I feel so lonely, like I'm just lonely. And people want to have richer friendships. And so that's why we're spending this time on this, because we all are feeling it and we all want it. And there's so much hope, and there is a solution to being able to get that and to have that. So y'all, I'm excited to spend the next several weeks with you exploring this. I hope this episode was helpful and hopeful, and I hope that you have just an amazing rest of your week. And to remember that the purpose of life is to be grateful, to be great, and to be full. All right, guys, I will see you next week with my co-host, Lindsley Brooks. Until then, have a fantastic week. Talk to you soon. Bye. If you love today's episode, make sure to share it with your girlfriends and invite them into this month's topic of community. And if you want to keep the discovery journey going of living more fully alive, check out all my past episodes from season 1 of the podcast over at maryhyatt.com/show. Plus, you'll be able to grab the show notes from this episode along with the essential oil recipe of the month that will help you find the courage to create a community that you love and nourish your body, mind, and soul along the way. Again, that's maryhyatt.com/show. See y'all next week.